Welcome back to my channel. I'm Shireen with Olive Street Designs, and today I am going to restore a 1946 Lane Hope Chest. This has a waterfall design top. The finish has completely failed. Again, this is nearly 80 years old. It's time for that finish to fail, but it's been heavily used. It's got lots of scratches, probably from a small dog or a cat. And, it's just been around. I'm sure it's got some stories to tell. The inside, however, is beautiful. Just got to clean that up a bit. I think it's hilarious that we have all of the stickers December 1946. Comes complete with a moth insurance policy that pays out $100. Another interesting little tidbit here, the original price tag, $39.50. So in today's dollars, what does $39.50 get you today? $630 was what this would cost. I mean, it's just such an interesting thing. It's like a time capsule just to go backwards and take a look at this. But this is a beautiful piece. This is a custom piece for a client. They brought this to me to restore it. And we're going to make this look beautiful once again. So this piece is, it's in decent shape as far as the bones. The bones are there. It's structurally good, but this finish has to go. So I'm starting out with my carbide scraper, and you can see that I'm using one hand. This is not the type of piece where you're going to go in here and go to town scraping this piece with a carbide scraper. I'm not using any more pressure on this than what I can do with one hand because I don't want to damage this. Certainly because of the waterfall, we don't want to get near that edge either. And so the finish on the top, I'm not sure yet about the rest of it, but at least the finish on the top is just crumbling. And what happens with this old varnish from 80 years ago is it just sort of crystallizes. And so as I'm scraping it off, it's really almost just exploding off of here. That's kind of hard to explain, but it is crystallizing and it just pops right off. So I don't have to do a lot and I don't want to damage this. So I'm really paying some extra attention around the edges. And I don't usually scrape all the way to the very, very edge. I'll take care of that later, but not with the carbide scraper. You can see I'm just extra careful around those areas. The other thing with the carbide scraper is, one, you need to make sure your blades are nice and sharp. So these blades on this particular scraper are replaceable. And I do swap them out occasionally. So they can get nicks and things in them, and then it's not being consistent. The other thing is always go with the grain of the wood. So you see as this piece has directional grain going everywhere, I'm going to be changing the direction of how I'm scraping with each change in the grain. But you can see how that's just popping off of there. See how it just kind of crystallizes in this dust? It's crazy when it gets that old what it does. Again, this is an old varnish finish that, this is an oil-based product from years ago. Products that we use now today, who knows what they'll do in 80 years. I don't know if they're going to be more durable or last longer, but I did as much scraping as I want to do on this. I don't want to risk damaging much else right now, so I got out my lacquer thinner. And, there's lots of products you can use at this point. Lots of people are using acetone. I just prefer to use the lacquer thinner with a pot scrubber. And just the typical green scrubber that you'd get in your kitchen to do your pots and pans with. This works great for this because it's just enough abrasiveness that will help to, work that lacquer thinner in there to help dissolve this finish. But these products evaporate so quickly. And that's why I like lacquer thinner over acetone. I think that acetone evaporates so fast that I just can't even work it in there and get it wiped off fast enough before it hardens again. And then whatever it was that you were dissolving, whether it was lacquer, some poly or something, it just sets right back up again. So you got it all liquidy and then boom, it's hard again. So this one does stay liquid a little bit longer, which I like. Of course, this product really is for cleaning tools. So I'm wearing gloves and my respirator. Of course, I was wearing my respirator because I was sanding. And, this smells like a nail polish salon. If you're going to go get your nails done, I'm sure you're smelling a lot of the same stuff. But because I'm doing so much of it, I want to make sure I'm wearing my respirator. But what I'm doing with the pot scrubber is I just dip it in there. I get some more of the product. I put it on there and I just sort of massage it in, and it's just liquefying the finish that's on there. And then, of course, you just wipe it back. So I'm going to go through 100 paper towels. But what I'm not doing is damaging this piece. And the other thing I'm not doing is scraping off layers and layers of this veneer, because every time it gets refinished, that veneer is going to get thinner. And although this, is wood, it is veneer over another type of wood, so I don't want to damage this veneer. But here's a really good view of what it's doing. And you can see it just gets kind of gummy at first. And so I just keep working it in there, and then I'll put some more lacquer thinner over this now that I've got it gummy, and then wipe it back with just a paper towel. And then the paper towel is just covered with gunk. After it sets up on the paper towel or it evaporates, now the paper towel's just got gunk on it. But the goal is to get it off of my piece. So this is a process I'm going to do 1,000 times. Just put it on there, work it in, wipe it off, and just keep on going. Now it is thinning out the product that's on there so much that I'm able to wipe it off, but it is also leaving behind a very thin layer of it. So, we'll take care of that later. So now I've flipped it up on its end, and I'm going to go through the same process here. This finish has not failed quite as much as the top, and this is a completely flat area with the grain going in one direction. So I feel a little more confident putting a little bit more weight into it, and then I make sure that I'm going to dust that edge out with my little bitty vacuum so that when I get in here, I'm not dealing with all that dust. So I scraped what I could, and again, just doing lacquer thinner on this end. I'm not scraping any of the rounded areas, not at all. This is all going to be stripped with lacquer thinner. And there's a ton of strippers and other products that you can use, but I am just loving the lacquer thinner these days. Now, it doesn't work on everything. Lacquer thinner, of course, dissolves lacquer type products. So there are some things that you put it on and it doesn't do anything too. So far, I have not found any of those products. The stuff that I've been refinishing has all dissolved very well with lacquer thinner. Now, in this area down here, what I decided to do was put the lacquer thinner on first and then make it all gummy and scrape it off instead of scraping first, because this finish was on here and it's just creating a glob of gunk. I don't know how else to describe that. It's a gob of gunk. But again, I'm just one-handing and not causing any damage to the wood. I'm not going into the wood at all. Sometimes when you're doing carbide scraping on other pieces where, you're just going to town on it, you are taking off a small layer of wood. This is because I'm using such light pressure, I am only dealing with the finish. And I'm just going to keep repeating this process. Put the lacquer thinner on, wipe it off, and then each time you put it on and wipe it back off, you take off more of the old finish. The pot scrubber does get kind of gummy, but then I put it back in the lacquer thinner in that little canister, and it melts it off of that again too. This area I was not going to scrape at all because of that type of wood grain in the center. I decided I'm completely stripping that, but look at my handprint on the paper towel. That is just the old finish melting away. Yeah, that wood grain in the center is so special, but it's going in so many different directions. I didn't feel comfortable scraping it at all, but it all dissolved with the lacquer thinner. Okay, and just all the rounded areas. I stood it up on its other end, and I'm going to do this one different than I did the other side. This is all trial and error. I just got lucky with this piece that the lacquer thinner really is working well, because sometimes you may try to use it and think this is going to be the best product I've ever had in my life, and then it doesn't do anything. So, then you have to move to an actual chemical stripper. But I put it on there first, again, got that really gummy, and now I'm just scraping that off. And I know I'm speeding this all up in some areas, but this is slow and tedious. But what I'm not doing, one, is rushing, and I'm not causing any damage to this piece. Being that it's almost 80 years old, I just really wanted to respect its age and, just the craftsmanship here. And, this is a very special piece to my clients, and I don't want to cause any damage to it. It was covered in scratches and things, and my goal is to refinish it in a way that makes it look new again. Okay, same process everywhere. We're getting to where we've pretty much scraped everything, and while I have it on its end, let's get rid of 80 years of cobwebs. I only found one live daddy longleg. It happens. I have even brought home black widows from people's houses. Oh, it freaks me out, but we just load them up so quick and bring them home and then unload them, and I'm like, whoa, check underneath. Okay, you can see on my sander, if you can look past the red layer, there's a thin black layer, and then that grayish one there is an interface pad. So I'm doing all of these areas with a pad. Now I've got just a fine grit on here, which is going to be equivalent to about 120, 150 grit sandpaper. But because of the pad, it is more gentle. And it allows me to do not only the flat parts, but also these areas that are contoured and round. I could just really get in there. And I know I'll get lots of comments about, why are you not sanding with the grain? But I was doing as much as I could with the grain. There's some areas where it was just not happening. It's just difficult. All right, I switched real quick there for the flat areas to a mesh. I took that interface pad off. I'm just kind of going back and forth because I found that the mesh in some areas was doing better to remove some of the residual stain. Because we got all the lacquer and everything off, but what I'm doing now with all the sanding is just getting rid of that last layer of stain. Just doing all the little areas and the details around that trim. I've got contour sanding blocks in this little tub that's sitting on there. Lots of different shapes, and then I just wrap a piece of sandpaper or a piece of mesh around it, and I'm able to get in there. I'll show that again later so you can really see the contour blocks. Okay, I have switched now to a traditional sandpaper that's flat. This is actually sanding mesh, but I'm not using the rounded pad right now because I want to really get in here on the flat areas. Again, going with the grain, I'm using 120 grit here, but very carefully. I probably could have gone in with 150 or something, but I'm using a detail sander. I'm not using an orbital, and so I am being very careful of this wood. And I'm just removing now the top coat of the varnish is really gone. I mean, we liquefied most of it, or I liquefied most of it, and it's just, really any residue, but what I'm taking off now is the stain. It doesn't take much to remove it. I'm just going with the grain. I'm only doing the flat area, so as soon as I hit that edge where the waterfall starts, I stopped, and then now I have a pad on here that looks like this. It's a hook and loop. It is not. It's a little different than the normal surf prep one because a lot of times those have the sandpaper or the grit already attached. This one is a hook and loop that you can put anything on, but it does have the pad. So I went ahead with my net because I thought that was working the best on that pad, just to get that waterfall area. And here's my contour sanding block so that I can get these edges. These pieces, when you go to do a restoration, is just about the sanding. So much sanding. And by the end of it, my fingers are just thrashed. And I know I should wear gloves, but when I do, they just kind of get in my way. So I just go with it. Now, this little detail scraper is fantastic. It has lots of different removable tips on the top. And this one I chose because I can get right into that groove that I couldn't get in there with my contour block, and then go back and smooth everything out. I'm only using it for that. I didn't need it really in any other places. And there were some areas where I was like, oh, I think I can get my sander in there. Sure enough. I mean, there's plenty of hand sanding to do on this, but when I can get the sander in there to do some areas, I'm going to do it. So, hours into sanding. So This piece is, I do really love doing these restorations on these, especially when there's something that's so special to someone. It's a little nerve-wracking sometimes because you've got an heirloom piece, but I really enjoy doing it. Okay, same process here. I've got the pad on there and the net, sanding net. And nets versus paper, I don't know if what to say, why I would choose one over the other. When I'm using it hooked up to my shop vac, and my shop vac is going to be used for dust extraction, I just feel like the nets work the best because it really sucks so much more dust out of there. All right, just getting the rest of that waterfall and this area with that wood in the front. It's like a burled wood, but not quite. Just the grain on that is so cool. It's just coming to life as I get the rest of that stain off of there. This is when it starts really get exciting because you're like, it's working. All of my efforts. You spend all day sanding and you finally it's like the end is in sight. And then more details. The bulk stuff is so fun to remove, but then you've got to spend the time here doing the tedious parts too. And getting in those tiny little bitty crevices is so important because the new stain that I'm putting on there won't stain over a really old stain like that. It would look horrible. So you have to get it out of there. Again, with the contour sanding blocks, they come in all different sizes. I have them thrown into a bin with a whole bunch of different sandpaper. You can't really see them, but I pull them out and I always go through them and choose which one's going to fit into that groove the best and then wrap my sandpaper around it. All right, I've done as much as I can do to that part. Time to turn this back, uprighted. Gonna open it up, and now where the lid, which is covering that top edge there, I have to make sure that I get that, even though it's not gonna show later, of course, unless they open it, but I wanna make sure everything is stripped. All right, I think the really dirty parts are done. The amount of sanding I've had to do, I am covered in dust from head to toe, but I want to make sure I get everything clean. This felt is in good shape, so I'm not going to replace it. Just getting everything out of the bottom here. All right, this is a tinted wood filler. It's called Wood Pate by Farmhouse. It is one of my favorites. It's stainable, but I like that it's tinted because you're not having to deal with staining something that's white. It's going to dry down kind of light. This is the other side. I just had some chunks missing of the veneer. It does kind of dry light, but when you put your stain over it and it gets wet again with the stain, that darker color comes through. It's such a great product, but it dries really hard. Much better than typical wood filler. And here it is. It is fully stripped. I've spent so many hours, and this is just so exciting to finally get this all dusted off. And when you dust it now, that wood grain just comes to life. But if all I did was seal it at this point, it would be orange again. And the goal is to not be orange. So we're going in with pre-stain conditioner. I've got a poly brush. That's what I prefer to use on these. This is one of my favorite ones. It's by Jen. And the pre-stain conditioner goes on, and it's going to really just help the stain go on evenly. It's moisturizing, and when you this is water-based, and I'm using all water-based products. But when you go in with a water-based stain, it sometimes needs a little help so that it glides on nice and smooth. So I'm just putting a nice layer on everything. I'm putting it on a little heavy over here, and I'm going to start doing less of that on the other side, but it's going to sit. And if it sits for 10 or 15 minutes and there's still a little bit of it standing there, then you just wipe it off. I have made the mistake before of not being super careful with the coverage of the wood of the conditioner. And then that area stained completely different. So my goal was to use the conditioner to help it go on evenly. But if you don't put conditioner on everything, now it looks horrible again. So take the time when you're doing this conditioner to make sure everything is covered. Wipe off any residue or what you have. I just had too much on there. You can see how much it just brightened everything up. This is the stain that the clients chose. And we're trying to kind of mimic what was there, but not so orange. So this was a really good tone. We looked at a bunch of swatches and this just warmed it up a little bit, but not going too dark. I'm using a paint edger here. This is just a little styrofoam edger that you would buy at the hardware store. I love these because you can really put on a lot of product all at one time, especially when using water-based stain. You have to completely saturate an area before you start taking it off, because what I have found is if I go in and do half of it and then try to do the other half, it will be completely blotchy where those two sections come together. So I do one complete section at a time, and I put a lot of product on there so that it's not drying out. I want to keep everything wet. If your water-based stain starts to dry out before you wipe it back, it's going to be blotchy. So the other thing that I do while I'm wiping it back is I have a little mister in my hand, the white bottle. It's got water in it, and I'm just misting. Again, I'm not wanting to dry it off yet. As I'm wiping it back and making sure it's very even and consistent, I want to make sure it's wet. So I'm just misting a little bit, and that helps it stay nice and moist while I'm getting it off of there. Just go through the same process on the end, put it on there, wipe it back. Now you can really see that edger. It holds a lot of product, so you really can just push it around very easily. Sometimes in some of the areas that are really detailed, I still have to grab my foam poly brush to get it in there, but most of the time I can get a lot of it done with this big edger. These are disposable, but I will say that when I'm cleaning out my sprayers and things, I can get all the stain out of this, so I've been using the same one for quite some time. Okay, I was misting everything with water and I'm wiping back, and as you wipe it back, you got to wipe it with the grain or you'll see your stain sitting on top of that wood. It will be not directional and it'll be blotchy. Thankfully with water-based, all you gotta do is kind of mist it, get it a little wet, and you can still work with it a little bit more. It also depends on the condition. So I'm working in early summer and this is warm. I'm warm. It's warm outside. I let that completely dry, and now I'm going in with top coat. I'm super happy with the color. This is a water-based top coat, and I'm going to do multiple coats of this. I'm not going to show them all here, but I sand in between each one and then spray another. I think I did 5 coats of top coat because I want this to be durable. I don't want it to happen how it was when it came to me. But let's take a quick look back at how this started. Yeah, it was pretty rough. And here it is now. So after 80 years, this is now completely rejuvenated. It's just been given a whole new life. It's like it's brand new all over again. This special chest to my client is now just something that she'll be able to hand down to her children and grandchildren if she chooses to do so. But just a beautiful, these Lane cedar chests really are so special. It was such a privilege to work on this piece. I hope you like it, and if you like these type of makeovers, be sure to follow for more.